As governments worry about stagnant economies, the old approaches to economic policy making seem inadequate for bringing back growth. Professor Mariana Mazzucato advocates conceiving mission-oriented innovation policies and emphasizes the need for public sector to rethink its role so that growth is more innovation-led, inclusive, and sustainable. Professor Mazzucato founded the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose at the University College of London, where she explores how public policy can be used to give direction to economic growth and innovation. In 2016, Professor Mazzucato worked with NASA and the European Space Agency to examine innovation policies related to the core missions of the space agencies.
Mariana Mazzucato's work is of special relevance to the space industry. She recommends that states should adopt policies to directly get involved in innovation to give it a directionality, while also creating an environment for the adoption of these innovations by industry, particularly new space.
Her work explores the existing and evolving public-private partnerships in the United States and in Europe, and the implications of these for space-related innovations, socioeconomic impacts, and growth.
And I picked up an interesting looking book called The Entrepreneurial State. I started to read it. It talked about value creation and the importance of having symbiotic relationships between government and the private sector, as well as the not-for-profit sector, in creating value for society.
Her groundbreaking research work connecting innovation, data infrastructure, public policy, and economy has been making a significant impact on the overall value chain of Earth observation and geospatial industry globally. For emphasizing public value across the innovation chain, it is our honor to name Professor Mariana Mazzucato the recipient of this year's Making a Difference Award for Innovation and Data Economy.
I am absolutely honored to be able to accept the award that you have given me, the Geospatial Award for Making a Difference. So I've been working for the last years trying to convince governments worldwide that we need a really different framework through which to have policies around innovation, industrial transformation, but also areas like development. And the fundamental problem is that the economic theory that actually drives a lot of policy making has been stuck in the past. It's been stuck in this idea that there's a market out there. Sometimes it fails, and the role of policy is to fix market failures. And so I've been arguing that actually what we require is an approach that is about market shaping and market creating, not market fixing. And very recently, this work has been recognized in the European Commission through a report that I wrote for them around mission-oriented innovation. So the concept of missions is today actually a legal instrument within Europe through which to really be able to direct our efforts at the biggest challenges we have right now around climate change, health, the digital divide, and so on. So your prize here, which I'm again deeply honored to have received, could not come at a better time. Also because this work is quite difficult. It's quite hard, I think, to go beyond just advocating for a policy, but to get one's hands dirty with it. So I've been trying to help governments think through, for example, how do we redesign procurement policy, industrial strategy, innovation policy, so it really catalyzes as much economy-wide and sector-wide innovation and investments as bold as those that helped us get to the moon and back 50 years ago. Those were not just investments in organizations like NASA, but also deeply private sector investments in companies like General Electric, Honeywell, Motorola, and so on. But the objective of government there was not to commercialize space. It was to really work together in a dynamic partnership to achieve such a bold but also specific goal, which was to get to the moon and back in one generation. And I really think that that mission-oriented approach, which means that you start with a challenge, transform it into a mission, design it in such a way that you get as much economy-wide, not sector-specific investment, and that redesigning of the tools bottom-up, procurement, price schemes, grants and loans, to drive through that bottom-up experimentation is a really useful way to think today of the kind of investment pathways that we need to actually reach, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Because as important as those goals are, they remain pretty broad, again, challenge-oriented, and transforming them into that mission-oriented approach, which provides a much clearer kind of framing of that transformation that is required across many sectors to solve a goal as specific as a carbon-neutral city within a specific time period, or 100 carbon-neutral cities across Europe by 2030, or 90% of the plastic being taken out of the ocean that would require, again, investment in innovation across multiple sectors, or in a city. I'm living in London. We have a knife crime problem. What does it mean to actually think about knife crime in a really specific way and to say zero teenagers over the next 5 years will die of knife crime? What does that mean for all the different investments that are required then for education, social services, youth centers, mental health, etc. And these social problems, and climate change is a social problem because it requires lots of behavioral change, are actually much more wicked and difficult than the purely technological ones, like going to the moon. So the challenge is great. And in a recent book I wrote called The Value of Everything, I argue that what's actually required to have this more purpose-driven, a mission-oriented approach is also to rethink what we even mean by value, and to really recognize that value is collectively created, and to recognize all the different value creators, including inside the public sector, but also the citizens themselves as value creators. That's why, by the way, I'm a big fan of the concept of the citizen's dividend more than UBI, universal basic income, because the concept of a citizen's share, a citizen's dividend, is a more explicit way to recognize that collective value creation process. But the next step is also to make sure that when we recognize the role, for example, of public institutions, whether it's in space, in digitalization, in health, that we don't just think about the active risk-taking that's required along the whole innovation chain, as bold as that which got us Silicon Valley, but also new forms of governing the way that we reward that collective risk-taking. So sharing both risks and rewards. I think that's very important. And that means, again, rethinking governance structures, ownership structures. And, when we're really stuck right now in this terrible and tragic COVID moment, these lessons, I think, are more important than ever. And so, especially when we're rushing towards something like a race for a vaccine, it becomes extremely important to make sure we govern that process of production of a vaccine in such a way that is, conditional, again, around common good characteristics. So if we want a vaccine to be universally available and accessible, that's going to mean actually governing the intellectual property rights in a particular way to make sure that everyone has access. For example, to make sure that we have a patent pool, as the World Health Organization is arguing for. And that means, again, fostering notions of collective intelligence. So collective value and collective intelligence being embedded in how we actually govern intellectual property rights. Anyway, thank you so much again. I am absolutely thrilled. And I got this wonderful, heavy award in the mail. But a deep thank you